Podcast City Network.
Listener discretion is advised.
You're listening to The Everett Lee Show. A shot of entertainment to the head. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the entertainment.
Welcome, everyone, to the Everett Lee Show podcast. I am Everett Lee. Quick shout out to all my followers on Twitter. You can follow me at the Everett _Lee, Facebook.com/the Everett Lee. Click that thumbs up. And, of course, Podcast City Network, the official host of the Everett Lee Show. You can check out the Everett Lee Show and much more shows on podcastcity.net. Podcast City Network on Facebook, Facebook.com, Podcast City Network. Hit that thumbs up. And, of course, on Twitter at Podcast City Net. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am back again for another week with another guest that will knock it out of the park tonight on the program. I have quite a bit to talk with my guest. Chris Carnage, my co-host, was supposed to jump on. However, he got called into work. Chris, I know you're listening, or you're going to listen back to this podcast. Miss you, but we'll get you on here next week. And, of course, shout out to David C. Russell and Robin Nilsson. Robin Nilsson of Russell Popcast and David C. Russell of Deathmatch Russell Podcast. And, of course, tonight, everything is brought to you by podcastcity.net. You can head over to podcastcity.net and check out Sports Sanity Customs. If you want a Podcast City Network t-shirt, head over to Sports Sanity Customs. They will hook you up with a t-shirt on sportsanitycustoms.com. City Limits Tap Room in DeLand, Florida, home of Draft Day and Podcast City Network. Head over to City Limits Tap Room in DeLand, Florida for a wide selection of brew on tap. Food menu with the grilled cheese is excellent. And, of course, a wide selection of TVs, indoor and outdoor, stage in the back for live events, and much, much more at City Limits Tap Room in DeLand, Florida. And, of course, Atlantic Sound Records. Head over to Atlantic Sound Records on International Boulevard in Daytona Beach if you're looking for that vinyl, CD, and cassette that you've lost at one time. They may have it. So hit them up on Facebook, Atlantic Sound Records. And if you're looking to book that destination to get away from it all, hit Telltale Travel on podcastcity.net. Hit up Brittany Emler, and she will hook you up with that destination to get away from it all. And it's all brought to you by podcastcity.net. Well, you know what? I think we need some music for our guest, man. You're going to love this, ladies and gentlemen. You're definitely going to love this right here. We're going to crank it to 11. You hear that? American made. That's right. He sure does, ladies and gentlemen. He certainly was. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the program the true master of wrestling ring music. Please welcome Hurricane J.J. Maguire.
Yes, sir. Hey, Everett. Hi, everybody. It is me.
Let's give you
You may not know it, but now you know it now, brothers and sisters. I am the true master of wrestling ring music, along with my great partner, and you all know him well and probably better than me, but Jimmy, the Mouth of the South Hart. We go way, way back, brothers and sisters, to the Gentrys. We were a hit group in the Gentrys and the top 10 records back in the day, in the 70s and the late 60s. But brothers and sisters, oh, wow, have I got a lot to talk about tonight.
Oh, yeah.
Everett. So here we go. What do you want to know?
Well, you caught me off guard right there. I love it. I definitely love it, man.
Good. That's what I live for.
I know. I definitely do love it. I definitely do love it, man. Well, let me ask you first off, how you been?
Oh, I've been great. Thanks a lot. I never felt better in my whole life. I lost 40 pounds here a little while back, and I either feel like a new man or an old woman. I can't tell which.
That is awesome. That is awesome. I do have some questions for you tonight. I do have quite a bit I want to ask you about your life growing up and to where it got you to where you're at right now. So the first question I want to ask you is, how was it growing up in Somerset, Kentucky?
Fabulous. It was really like a dream come true. It's a rural town, but it's on the Lake Cumberland up here in Kentucky, and we have over 1,500 miles of shoreline on this lake up here. And it's like I say, it's a vacation town. So early on, I got in a group called the Sounds Unlimited, and we wound up being Kentucky's #1 prom band in those years. That was in the mid to later 60s. When I started out with them, we did soul music. You didn't have heavy music just yet, but just a few years later, here came the heavy stuff, and so we switched over from all soul review to doing the Doors and doing Jimi Hendrix and the Who and whatever. We did a blend of every type of music, so we were real popular because we did a wide variety of styles of music that suited everybody's taste at the time.
Oh, nice. The 60s was a really good time for music, man. So much going on with music on the music scene, and it was such a really, really good time.
Yes, it was. And it was, you had to play your own instrument. You couldn't take a computer and push an auto fix button like today. But, you had to really learn to do what you were doing, and you had to do it well, or you didn't have a chance. I'm not saying that people today can be sorry and make it big, but there are some sorry artists that are pretty big. But, technology has made a big super jump since those times. I've been through it all. I started out on analog tape and made my way all the way through that jungle, all the way up into the digital jungle. So, but I do wish that on our wrestling theme music that we wound up doing, and I did, I wish that we would have had digital technology, because the quality now is at a high level and so forth. And some of the stuff, back then was kind of rough and raw, but that kind of made the sound. If you listen to the 60s music, you can hear that roughness and rawness in it, but the content of the material seemed to be pretty superior, I always thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just that with the recording and everything, and how everything came along and stuff with the recording and just the analog and stuff. It was just a really great time with a lot of artists and stuff coming out. And so, being in the Gentrys, you and Jimmy Hart pretty much opened and traveled across the country.
Yes, we did. We traveled. I told someone the other day, they showed a picture, I believe Robin Nelson, a good friend of ours, had a picture on Facebook of Earl Hebner. And I said, if I had $1 for every road trip that I've traveled with Dave and Earl Hebner and Jimmy Hart and myself in a car, I wouldn't have enough time to count my money.
That is awesome, man. I love that. I definitely do love that. And being a musician and getting in the music, what was some of your earlier musical influences that made you want to pick up an instrument and play?
Well, I guess I was probably about 3 years old or something, and it's Christmas time. And so I crawled over there, or whatever I did. I guess I was walking for sure by then. But I got up on the piano bench, and I started playing Silent Night. And everybody dropped everything they were doing, came running into the living room and thought, who's playing the piano? And it was me. And so they were pretty flabbergasted at that. That's a good word from the past, isn't it? And so immediately my mother said, he's got something here beyond the norm. We better get him into formal training. Well, nobody would take me on because at that time they wanted you to be 5 years old before you would start taking the formal piano lessons. So, but anyway, I finally got in there at 4 3/4. A woman finally said, "No, we don't do it, but Jim's advanced, so we'll take him in and we'll see what we have." So immediately I started studying classical music. So I played all the classical music from age 5 all the way up until I was in 7th grade, because that's when the Sounds Unlimited came to me and asked me if I'd like to get out of classical music and get into pop music. And I said, well, sure, yeah, I'd give that a stab, I guess. Why not? And so I went over to the audition. They were actually called the Undertakers to start with. Yeah. And so I said, I tell you, I like the band, and they were very talented, and they all had musical backgrounds, so most of the guys in the band. And I said, but there's only one problem. I don't like that name, the Undertakers. The drummer rode up to the garage that we were practicing in, that I auditioned in, on his banana seat bicycle, and he'd taken a magic marker and drawn the Undertakers on that banana seat. And so I said, if you're willing to change the name, I'll join. So they said, okay, genius, so think something up. And so I said, okay, how about the Unlimited Sounds? Mm-hmm. And then one of the guys said, wait a minute, how about the Sounds Unlimited? And so then they changed the name, and then that's where it all started for me. And like I say, we went on from there and did quite well. We won all the fairs here in Kentucky that we played, and we were the judges in all the contests and things we were in. They always said that the Sounds Unlimited have something the other groups don't have. And somebody asked them, said, what's that? And the judges said in the contest, said, the Sounds Unlimited have class. And we did. We had special outfits made, and we were a real classy type of group. We had horns and the whole thing. Mm-hmm. But that's where I started with the classical music training and so forth. And I played through all that, and then I decided it'd be fun to try to get into modern popular music. Right.
That is awesome. Going from classical to pop, and then into getting in with the Gentrys. Now, speaking of Jimmy Hart with the Gentrys, how did you first meet Jimmy Hart? How did that come about, meeting Jimmy Hart?
Okay, I was playing with a group from Lexington, Kentucky called a fellow named Doug Breeding had a band, and actually two of Exile's members right now, the group Exile, which you're familiar with. Mm-hmm. They were in our band before Exile. We were in that band together. It was Doug Breeding, Sonny Lemaire of Exile now, and Marlon Hargis of Exile now, and myself now. And I actually joined the Gentrys. I had a chance at one time. Exile had some member changes. They had quite a few over the years, 35 different members over time.
Wow.
But I decided I wanted to leave Kentucky. I'd already done, they were real big here in Kentucky at that time, mm-hmm. but they hadn't had any hit records yet or anything just yet, whatever. So I joined. The way I met Jimmy is the agent that was booking our band, the Doug Breeding Band. Nice. We were called the Second Hand Band was the name. And then we changed the name after I joined. A few months after I joined, Doug said, we're more powerful of a band now, let's change the name. So changed the name to Powder Keg. But same group of people. But at any rate, we went to Florida and played a series of gigs. And then Sonny Lemaire decided he's our bass player, and he's also Exile's bass player now.
Right.
Sonny went to do a duo in Las Vegas with a friend of his that, two-man duo thing, and for a real big buck. So Sonny quit the band to go out there and make a big money in Vegas playing, with a friend of his in a duo. But the agent that booked us happened to call me one evening, and the phone rang, and my mother answered. This is back when you had a telephone on a stand by the door, the way it used to be. And so Mom said, telephone Jim, and I got on the phone, and I said, hello. And Joe Powers was his name, the agent. And he said, well, I'm sorry you guys broke up because the people loved you all when you played the Florida gigs. But things happened. But I'm also booking some concert group called the Gentrys. He said, and I just got a call from Jimmy Hart, the leader of the band. He said that they're looking for a drummer. And so I said, great. And so he said, call him right now. He's standing by, and he'll talk to you. And so I called this guy named Jimmy Hart. I'd never heard of him or seen him. And so Jimmy told me, he said, you sound like you're a real nice guy and everything, but we've got Jerry Lee Lewis's Great Balls of Fire. We've got his drummer auditioning. Right. And then we have a former drummer that was with Ray Charles. Mm-hmm. But see, in my mind, I knew when he was saying that, these guys aren't heavy rock drummers. These guys are rockabilly drummers and more traditional music type drummers. Not that they couldn't play some of that, but that isn't really their thing. So I said, I tell you what, Jimmy, that sounds good. Those guys are great, but I think I'm more what you need. How about I'll drive to Memphis and audition at my expense, and if you take me, then you'll just reimburse me half my expenses, and then we'll go on from there and see how we do. He said, well, okay, I just want to let you know who you're up against. So I drove to Memphis 2 days later, put my drums in the back of my car, went down there, and went to the old American recording studios. That's where Elvis cut a lot of his hits in the day. And so we went in there, and these other guys one guy was already playing, and then they let him go out in the hall, and then they called the other guy in, and then I was the last one. And then I came in, and they waited out in the hall, and we played Going Down, a song called Going Down by Don Nix. Going down, 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 down. And he's from Memphis also, Don Nix was, a real nice guy.
Oh, nice.
But anyway, so I had double bass drums. Well, they had never seen anything like that. And so we played through half of Going Down, the song.
Right.
And they stopped everybody. And I thought, I scared them. This double bass stuff has freaked them. I did too much, I guess. Well, so much for me. So then they whispered to each other, Jimmy and his guitar player, Wes Stafford, who's since passed away.
Right.
And so then Jimmy walked away and went out in the hall. And then I just kind of sat there, and Wes didn't say anything. He just said, Hart will be back in a minute, and we'll tell you who we're going to take. So anyway, Jimmy had gone out there to tell those guys to go home. That's what he did. And he came back in, and then they both smiled and turned around and said, welcome to the band, Maguire, and shook my hand, and there I was in the Gentrys.
Nice. That's awesome. So you pretty much knocked out the competition, and you were in the Gentrys, and there you are, and you got the tour play. And
immediately, we left the next day for Florida, and we did a show with. Actually, now this is going to blow your mind out.
Okay,
we were at the top of the bill, and guess who was under us?
Who's that?
Steppenwolf and Chicago.
Oh, no way, Steppenwolf.
Because the Gentrys had just said, were known from the multi-million seller Keep On Dancing. Now, I joined in later of 72, and we covered Cinnamon Girl by Neil Young. It was on his album.
Right.
But we put it out as a single and had a top 40 worldwide hit with it as a single. And it's tough to tell. The music sounds pretty identical, but if you listen real close, Jimmy's voice is phenomenal. A lot of people don't know this in the wrestling fan world and whatever, but I'm going to tell you, and you better listen up real clear right now and get the wax out of your ears, everybody, because Jimmy Hart, his greatest talent he is one of the greatest ring managers that's ever lived, without any doubt. I always tell Jimmy, I say, Jimmy, you're the most colorful ring manager that's ever lived. And he says, oh, well, okay, thanks for saying that, McGuire. Jimmy's very humble. But what I'm going to tell everybody loud and clear is Jimmy Hart is a fabulous singer. His vocal abilities are phenomenal, even greater than his managerial skills, if you could believe that. And most of the people have heard him sing maybe a little bit on a few of our wrestling themes here and there, but we usually used other people because he couldn't be identified as a heel singing good guy songs.
Right.
So, but his voice is phenomenal. He sounds very similar to the guy that sang for Atlanta Rhythm Section.
Nice.
They have very similar tone and projection and everything, but Jimmy, my first encounters with Jimmy was not wrestling; it was music, and then the wrestling came later for us.
Yeah, that's one of the next things I want to ask you. You're a Jimmy. You're in a band. You have a top 40 hit. You're touring the country. You're touring with Steppenwolf, Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you're doing all this. How did the Gentrys, Jimmy Hart, and yourself get into the world of wrestling? How did that come about?
Oh, wow. It's fun. I love to tell these stories because, first of all, they're all bona fide true stories. I'm not. There's two people in the wrestling business I know for a fact. I'll say three with Jimmy Hart. But I'll tell you, the Honky Tonk Man, I did his music for him too. I got long sideburns and the hair slicked back. You know the song.
Yes.
And Honky Tonk Man, at any risk, always tells the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I always tell the truth, especially when it comes to wrestling and these things that people are really especially a lot younger people as yourself and other fans are interested in. I want people to know the truth. That's why I came forward out of the dark shadows to display myself and let people really know who I was. I didn't think anybody cared. My son is 15 years old, and one day he came home from school and he said, "Dad, the kids at school are asking me, is your dad that wrestling music man?" And I thought, oh my God, kids that are 14, 15 years old care about something that I did 2 decades ago or whatever it's been, 3, some of it, or what have you. I was blown away that anybody cared. I just thought it was something that had been done and gone by.
Right.
But, to answer your question there, the way we got into wrestling now, when we were playing in the Gentrys, on Sunday, the only day we had off was a Sunday.
Right.
And so on one Sunday, Jimmy said, "Maguire, let's go down to the auditorium and let's watch some wrestling." And I went, "Oh yeah, I love wrestling, Jimmy. I watch it since I was a little kid. I always watched Saturday morning wrestling. Put my cereal on and my lunch or whatever, and sit there and watch the wrestling. And love wrestling." He said, "Well, we're going down today, and guess who we're going to meet?" I said, "Who?" He said, "Sputnik Monroe." And I went, "Really? I've heard of Sputnik. He's huge." And he went, "Yeah." He said, "Let's go watch." So we went down, and when we sat down there, Everett, let me tell you, Jimmy Hart never took his eyes off that ring. He never looked over at me. We would talk, and I'd look at him, but he never turned his head to look at me. He never took his focus off of that ring through the whole show.
Right.
And I knew that he was really something serious there. And so then we after it's over, went down and talked to Sputnik, and we took Sputnik back to his hotel room and everything. So really, Sputnik Monroe was the first big wrestler that I ever met. Now, you must understand, this is before WWF and all that, somewhat before. And so Jimmy's interest was in there big. So then fast forward a little bit more, and Jimmy was going to the matches, Mid-South matches of Jerry Lawler and them, and which wound up being a big part of the roster of WWF. They took a lot of people out of Mid-South, And so anyway, Jimmy was working merchandise. Then Lawler saw him out there and knew him from the Gentrys.
Right.
And that's about all Lawler knew him. And so he said, "Jimmy Hart, would you sell my merchandise for me out in the lobby of the auditoriums, the Coliseums and whatever?"
Yeah.
Jimmy said, "Sure, King, I'd be glad to do that." So Jimmy didn't know anything. Jimmy didn't know a gable grip from Grippo's potato chips. He knew nothing.
Right.
So King came to him and said, "Well, Jimmy, you're doing a great job on the merchandise, but why don't you be my ring manager?" And Jimmy said, "King, how do you do that?" If you could believe that. And King said, "Well, I'll show you how."
Right.
And so next thing you know, Jimmy became Lawler's ring manager. And then what that did, then one day I got a phone call, and it was Jimmy. And he says, "Maguire," he says, "Lawler wants to do a record to sell out in the lobby of the matches, And I said, "Really? That sounds okay." He said, "Yeah, well, let's do something." I said, "Okay." So then Lawler called me. Lawler says, "Maguire, I heard how talented you are. You play all the instruments and write all that music, and Jimmy does lyrics, and you guys get together and do what you do." He said, "In the Gentrys," he said, "I'm impressed that he said, I want to fly you down to Memphis and do a song for me."
No
and
way.
I said, "Sure, King, I'd love to do that." So Jerry flew me down first class, put me up at the first class hotel. Jimmy came over and said, "Maguire, what are we going to do?" And I said, "You know what? This is the disco era. We're right on the kind of maybe the tail end of it, but it's still selling big.
Yeah.
Why don't we take Neil Sedaka's song, 'Breaking Up Is Hard to Do,' and I'll rearrange it disco style."
Oh, no way.
And that's what we did. And that was the first record that we did. And then the next record that was done was the Ballad of Handsome Jimmy Valiant.
Nice.
So that's where it kind of all began. That's how it all went together. And Jimmy originally started, he came, when he was before he was going to be manager, Lawler told him this would be a good gimmick. Jimmy dressed up like a big fat woman out in the audience with popcorn and slopping around, and she'd be bad-mouthing him. I wish there was, there's actually some tapes of that somewhere. I wish somebody would find that and put that back on the internet.
Yeah, I'd definitely love to see that.
He dressed up like a big fat woman and heckled Lawler. And that's how it started, and then it turned from that into they exposed it. "Oh, it's Jimmy Hart of the Gentrys. Who is he trying to fool?" And then he threw all that off and then did the ring managing thing.
Nice.
That's where it started. That's how it started. That's where it all began, brother.
I want to give a shout out to the viewers that's viewing right now. What JJ just mentioned, if anyone can find that, could you message me that? Because I'd love to see that if it exists on YouTube. I'd love to see that there, ladies and gentlemen. I definitely would. And I know JJ would love to see that too,
yes,
if there's any of that footage out there. Now, leading into working with Jerry Lawler and working with Memphis Wrestling, basically. Now, how did you and Jimmy get in contact with WWE, with Vince McMahon? How did that come about?
Well, you put your automatic transmission in reverse, Everett.
Okay.
The way it worked is Vince actually called. He looked at the tapes and stuff from Mid-South.
Right.
And so actually, Hillbilly Jim had mentioned up there. Hillbilly was already up there. And Hillbilly told Vince, said, Vince, I'll tell you, if you have anything to you at all, thanks for hiring me, but we need Jimmy Hart up here. And Vince said, Jimmy Hart? Yes, a guy named Jimmy Hart. He said, I've heard of his name. He's down there in Mid-South, isn't he? And like you were and whatever. He said, yes, sir, but I've got some tapes I want you to see, boss. So Hillbilly actually linked it all up, and Vince saw the tapes. That's all it took. Vince got on the phone right at that very moment and called Jimmy at home.
Oh,
okay,
no
Jimmy
way.
answers the phone. Jimmy answers the phone, and Jimmy Hart, this is Vince McMahon. And Jimmy said, yeah, okay, superstar. He thought it was Dundee Ribboning or something. So he said, sure thing, yeah, buddy. And he hung up on him. He hung up on Vince.
He hung up on Vince. Oh,
hung up on Vince. And then Vince called right back and says, Jimmy, it really is Vince. This is Vince. And I want you to come to New York next Tuesday. I've got the plane tickets for you waiting. I want you to come up. We want to talk to you about joining the WWF.
Right.
And Jimmy said, are you sure this isn't a rib? This isn't you, is it, superstar? You kept me quiet. And so anyway, he hung up on Vince when Vince called him the first time. Yeah, true story. Yes, sir.
Oh,
Jimmy will verify it. Any of you guys that go over by the bar and grill, just ask him. He'll tell you.
Yeah. Wow.
We're a lot alike. Jimmy Hart and I, we realize that we're doppelgangers.
Right.
People continually ask me if we're brothers or kin or what have you, but we just realized that we're two people that never knew each other, that met each other, and I guess we had some sort of bromance. There wasn't any romance, but we were bromance, and I guess we just realized that we had similar qualities and similar ideals and similar similarities, Right. It's just kind of an odd thing, but that's how it worked. We were lucky that we bumped into each other, because look what we wound up doing. We did more icon themes than anybody in the business.
Oh, yes. That's one thing I want to ask you. If you can name off just a few of ones that our viewers and listeners would know that you've heard. You've heard JJ's work. I've heard JJ's work. So basically, just ramble off the top of your head what we were talking about earlier before we went live.
The most played theme in wrestling history of all time is the Sexy Boy theme. How about starting there?
There you go, right there.
Sexy Boy, yeah.
Shawn Michaels.
He's so cool. He's so sexy. Yeah. I wrote that in 5 minutes, and Jimmy penned the words as I was playing the chords, and that's what you got. And that's me playing all the instruments on it too, as most of the themes were.
Nice.
But Sexy Boy, $1 Million Man, Bret Hart, Road to Destruction, his theme. Oh Lord, did I say $1 Million Man?
Yes.
Honky Tonk Man.
Yes.
Let's see. I've got my list here. Yeah, there's so many I get jumbled up trying to think of them all. 114 themes and bumpers altogether, but
that's a lot of themes.
Legion of Doom, Barbarian, Beefcake Strut, Big Boss Man theme, American Males, Brian Pillman theme, Blondes Have More Fun, Booty Man, of course Bret Hart, Common Man Boogie. That was Dusty's theme. And I really miss Dusty. He was a beautiful person.
Yeah, Dusty.
Crush, the Crush theme. Demolition, that's one of my favorites that I think that I came up with. And actually, Rick Derringer, people think Rick Derringer wrote that. No, he didn't. I wrote it all except for the chorus. And Jimmy Hart was smart, and he said, Maguire, leave the chorus off. And I said, well, that won't be a complete song.
Right.
He said, "No, leave it off, and when we send it up to New York for the album, the Rick Derringer will add those 2 chords on the bridge, and we'll share a writer's credit with an icon person." And I went, "Sounds good to me."
Nice.
But Rick Derringer just replicated exactly what I played. He didn't, he just put the 2 chords on the chorus that I'd already written anyway.
Right.
But I actually wrote the whole song, and Jimmy wrote the lyrics. Here come the Axa! Here come the Smasher! Walking Disaster, baby. Then also Coco Beware.
Yes, Coco
Earthquake.
Beware. Earthquake.
Heart Foundation. High Energy. That was Coco Beware and Owen Hart. Miss Owen, too.
Yes.
The Glamour Girls did the Hammerman theme for Greg Valentine. And then we had Jimmy Jameson of Survivor sang the Big Boss Man original theme. If you ever take a trip down to Macon County, Georgia. That one.
I'm a big boss man. I'm sorry.
Yep. And then Hunka Hunka Honky Love for WCW. And Hulkster's in the House and all the stuff from Wrestling Boot Band. The Mountie, Jeff Jarrett theme, Joe Gomez theme, Junkyard Dog, of course, Sexy Boy, Kamala, Kurt Angle.
Kurt Angle?
Kurt Angle, yep. Madness,
No.
Mark Young theme, the Marty Jannetty Rockers theme.
Yes, I love the Rockers.
Marty Jannetty.
Yes.
$1 Million Man, let's see, more Mountie stuff. We did a couple of variations of the Mountie, and let's see here. Then the New Beverly Brothers, and not to mention Nasty Sensation, the Nasty Boys theme.
Nasty Boys, yep.
Orient Express theme.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. I'm looking at my sheet as I flip through it. We'll just do a few more. We'd be here all night if I try to read them all. The Power and Glory theme, Public Enemy, Lottie, 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 We Likes to Party.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. The Repo Man. That's me doing the voice on that. Repo Man. I sampled it and played it down low.
Nice.
Of course, the Road to Destruction for Bret Hart. I think I already said that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I said the Rockers and Sexy Boy. And Shane Douglas theme.
Nice.
Let's see. Tatanka. Superfly Snuka was the first WWF theme that I did.
Superfly. That's such a good.
That's me too. Superfly. But I sampled it and played it on a sampled keyboard 2 octaves lower, so it has that voice. But I believe I was the first person to ever use a sampled voice that way before all the rappers did.
Right.
I have to look a little closer to that, but nobody had. And then all of a sudden, it was on that, and then every rap artist you heard had that lowered sampled voice thing going. And I kind of felt like, hey, I did it first. Tatanka, Tugboat, all the video game music and stuff for all the different wrestlers and different things.
Mm-hmm.
And on from there. But we were just lucky that we got to do all the greatest of all times, because everybody that came through during that time, wound up being really something. And the funny part, real quick, of this story that I'll tell, and we can go on something else, is that when my father used to tell me a story about how my grandfather, Dr. Maguire, saved the life of Strangler Ed Lewis.
Oh, no way.
And he was in Lexington at the Opera House wrestling, and he came out, he chewed gum before he got to the ring. A fan slapped him on the back, and he got choked on it, and he was turning blue for real. This wasn't part of a show or anything. And so they got on the megaphone and said, there's a doctor in the house. Well, Granddad was sitting right there ringside with my father. He was only like about 19 years old. And so Granddad stepped around the ropes or whatever, the barricade, and did whatever he did and got the gum out of him. Strangler was so thankful that he had him come to the back when the show was over, and he said, you saved my life out there. So if you'd like a horse and buggy, a new one, just, it's done. Or if you'd like a newfangled car, either one, you choose it and it's yours. And Granddad said, well, thank you, Strangler, but I can't accept any gratuities because I took Hippocratic oath to save lives and so forth. So, but then Granddad looked at my dad, and my dad said that they looked at each other, and Granddad looked at Strangler and said, but you know what, Strangler, how about lifetime ringside seats? Strangler said, done. And they had lifetime ringside seats for the rest of the duration. But for those that want to look into it, Strangler Ed Lewis and his promoter were the people who created the undercard.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be surprised. There's a lot of icons that don't know this.
Right.
Wrestler. And then fast forward, Strangler Ed Lewis and his promoter were instrumental in helping to create the formation of Capital Wrestling. You know what that is?
Yeah.
That's what became WWF. Now, hey, Matt, I mean, decades and decades before my dad met my mother, before I was born, my grandfather saved the greatest wrestler of all time. He was the Hulk Hogan of that era, and for a long time.
Right.
Before Hulk Hogan was even born or anything, or me either.
Right.
And then look at that. All of a sudden, I wake up one day and I wind up being a part of the greatest show on earth. Isn't that something?
I know that is something right there. That don't happen to a lot of people, actually getting to work in the behind the scenes like you did and create so much music. Because I want to throw this out there and say the characters and the list of songs and themes for the wrestlers that we all grew up watching on TV. You made that character and that person come to life with that entrance, because that entrance fit that character and that became part of them, because every time you heard it, you knew who was coming to the ring. You knew who was coming out, and you just, by the beginning of that music, and you knew that your favorite wrestler was coming out, and it was such a great time. And
that's kind of you to say that. I mean, I've had so many people of all ages and walks of life come up to me and say, thank you so much for what you did, and it's the fabric of our life. And when people say that,
yeah, it is.
Take a breath.
I mean, it's true.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah, it's true, because a lot of the wrestlers I grew up watching on TV and stuff, it's just, I knew who was coming to the ring as soon as the music hit. I knew which one was coming. No matter if it was Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Superfly, Junkyard Dog, just Demolition, and just I knew who was coming to the ring as soon as their music hit. I'm like, here they come. You know, $1 Million Man, that laugh, I love that. And
well, I always tried to I wrote the music to fit the character. I didn't try to write the music to show off what I think that I should do.
Right.
I wrote the music for those characters. I went, first of all, I mean, you know, I didn't just watch them on TV or get a picture sent. I traveled with these guys.
Yeah.
Everett. I mean, I've been around the world with the greatest of all time. And I was able not only to honored and privileged to do the music for them, but I was honored and privileged to be able to travel with them and spend personal time away from the ring with all these icons and get to know them as well. And that's how I was able to come up with what fit the character. If they came out in a green outfit, then the darn music needed to sound kind of green too. You know what I mean? I wrote the music to fit them, not to fit me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just...
I guess I succeeded, because here we are talking about it all these years later.
Yeah.
But Jimmy Hart, Jimmy's a great inspirational... there's nobody more of an inspirational person than Jimmy to get your motor going and get you fired up and create. And Vince McMahon always said that Jimmy Hart is my most loyal employee, you know, hardest working. That's what he said.
Yes.
And when I told Vince that story about Strangler Ed and all that,
right?
Vince shed a tear. He actually cried a little bit on that, and I never could understand why was that so touching to Vince that he would shed a tear like that.
Right.
Now I know. Now I found out. You know, as time went on, he didn't say Maguire. He was so important in helping us to Capital Wrestling to be formatted, and we based our way. We worked it off of things that he and his promoter had pioneered, and so on and so forth. And then I realized why he shed a tear on that. But that's how heavy that Vince is into it, and that's why you're still seeing the number one entertainment vehicle today. Still is because Vince McMahon is wrestling.
Yes, yeah, I agree. I definitely do agree. Now, with doing the themes for WWE. WWF. Okay. Now, you being with Jimmy Hart and the Hulkster, Hulk Hogan, because you got to really, I mean, you got to really know the talent and stuff in WWF, and you really did get to know I'd say with being with Jimmy Hart, knowing Hulk Hogan. Now, when Hulk stepped away from wrestling in 1994, correct me if I'm wrong, it was at 93 or 94 he stepped away from wrestling to pursue acting.
That's correct. He did Thunder in Paradise, which I was a character on too, and did music for.
Yes, that's the next thing I was going to ask you about. Now, I love that story, how that came about. How did you end up scoring the music and actually appearing on Thunder in Paradise, which I did watch when I was younger. I loved that show. I did.
Well, the way that all worked out is Jimmy called me and said, Maguire Hulkster's an executive producer with the Burke, Bonin, and Schwartz producers that do Baywatch. They've all hooked up together. They're going to do a new TV show, a concept thing that Hulk's going to be in called Thunder in Paradise. I said, oh, it sounds cool. He said, we're going to film it down here at Disney because they got all the locations right here on the Disney lot. You know, you got Europe, you got England, you got China, you know, all that's down there. You know, it looks like it. So he said they're wanting an end theme. They've got a theme for the opening part already, but they want an end theme. And so we have a chance. So you want to come down and let's put something together and give it a pitch. And I went, well, sure. So I put my gear in the vehicle and drove down to Florida and set up and whatever. And so I said, well, I think it needs to be a reggae thing, Jimmy, because, you know, this show is about the ocean or the water. And, you know, reggae seems to be in on the beach this year. So I said, okay. So it took me like about 3 minutes to go, dun, 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 when the sun goes up in paradise. So I was playing the lift, and as I was playing the lift, Jimmy was writing the words right there with it. We wrote the whole thing in like 15 minutes.
Oh, no way. No way.
Yeah. And then, so we went to a studio called Greg Reich Studio, and he had done a lot of big recordings at the time. And he was up in a little bit more of northern Florida there. We drove from Orlando for a couple hours up north. But anyway, so we went in, and I recorded the theme. And Jimmy wrote the lyrics, and I played all the instruments and wrote all the music, and there we were. And so we went to audition it. We were going to play it in real time, though, before we recorded it. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Burke, Bonin, and Schwartz at like 3 feet in front of us. I mean, I was able to reach out, touch them. We were so close. And I had my drum machine and my keyboard, and I played the left-handed bass with my left hand and the chords with my right hand on the other keyboard, and had the drum machine going. So it sounded like a whole band, you know, and Jimmy sang it.
Right.
And they were just ecstatic. When we hit the last note on it, they leapt out of their seats and hugged us and shook our hands and said, that's it. That's what we got. We need. Yeah, that's it.
Oh,
and
no way.
then Greg Bonin said, Maguire said, let me ask you something. I said, yes, sir. Thank you for accepting the theme. It's our pleasure, really. Thank you. We're really honored and really appreciate it. He said, well, Maguire, how long were you planning to be down here? And I said, well, Mr. Bonin, you know, I brought like 4 pairs of underwear and socks and whatever, and I just figured I'd be down here a day or two and time enough to do the theme and hang it for a day maybe and then head on back. He says, well, you better get yourself out to Target and get some more clothes and underwear and socks because you're going to be down here for the whole summer because you're also going to be a character on the show. Hello?
Wow.
Hello? Am I still on? I thought I must have fallen into a dreamscape or something.
Right.
And so, but now here's what's even stranger on that. So anyway, I did go to Target for those that want to know. I did get more underwear and socks, so everything worked out good. But I was character Tone Deaf on the show, as you remember. Jimmy Hart and I were the music jabronis that were, you know, played music at the beach bar.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
One thing I loved about the show was how it featured during the episodes and stuff on the TV show. And also you see Jimmy at the bar. We've seen you at the bar, and then we get to see other wrestling talent on the show too, which was really great and stuff. I think off the top of my head, I remember seeing Brutus Beefcake, Jim the Anvil, Neidhart, and
Steve Borden.
Yep.
Steve Borden was on, I'm trying to remember the name of the episode. It was a 2-part episode, but Sting was fabulous on that.
Yeah, Sting. Yeah, that was great. That definitely was great. Now, Thunder in Paradise, that actually they did a TV movie. That's how I found out about the TV show. I remember when they played the TV movie of Thunder in Paradise, and then they started the show. How many seasons did Thunder in Paradise run for?
Thunder in Paradise actually only ran one complete season, but the reason why it wasn't canceled because of crummy ratings or anything, it was tops in the ratings. But the reason it was because Hulk had an offer to go back to wrestling with WCW.
Yes.
So that's why the show quit. It wasn't canceled or anything. And but here's the funny part of that. Even though the show only ran one complete season, it's the second biggest syndicated cable TV show in history of television.
Huh. No way. No way. I
Yes,
wouldn't
sir.
have even thought about that.
Yes, sir.
Because I remember...
It sure is. Right behind Baywatch. Baywatch is the number one most cable syndicated TV show, and Thunder in Paradise is the number 2, even though it ran one season.
Nice.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I remember when NBC had Sequest on, it went head to head with that and stuff. You see, I always thought it was like NBC because Thunder got canceled because NBC Sequest. But the funny thing about that is when Thunder ran its one season and Hulk went back to wrestling, went to sign with WCW. Sequest, I think, lasted one more season, and then it was done with. Man, it got axed.
Yeah, it was having rating problems. We were hammering everything, and even David Hasselhoff was jealous. Hasselhoff was nervous because Hulk was showing him up. Hasselhoff, he doesn't have the muscles Hulk does.
Right.
And
right.
Hasselhoff was nervous about that because Baywatch was starting to slip some too. Had Hulk wanted to stay with the show, we would have been what picked up the slack from Baywatch. Has only lasted another couple of 3 years anyway too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that our show might even still be on the air almost as many years had it been that sort of thing. But Hulk loves his wrestling, and that's what he wanted to do more than anything. So Eric Bischoff has worked a good deal out for him, and the rest you all know about. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
now here's something kind of weird. I just thought in regard to that question.
Okay.
I had just like 2 years earlier, a year and a half to 2 years earlier, my friend John Barker, who's an engineer friend of mine, recording studio engineer, and he's also one of the guys. His team developed the SVGA computer monitor, which is ancient history now, but at the time it was a big deal. Mm-hmm. He worked for IBM.
Right.
But at any rate, we went down to Disney World and took a vacation for fun, just a couple of buddies having a fun trip down there. Mm-hmm. Well, we were taking the tour, and they were shooting Dick Tracy, the movie Dick Tracy, from back in the 80s or whenever it was. Mm-hmm. And we looked down on that sound stage, and it was the diner that was used in that and whatever, and they were filming some scenes in the movie. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, I don't know what possessed me, but I turned around to my friend John. I said, "You know something, John? The next time I come down here, I'm going to be down there on that sound stage when I come back."
No way.
And brother, it happened. Less than 2 years later, I was down there on that very same sound stage with Thunder in Paradise.
That is awesome. That's
yeah.
I don't know what to say about that.
It still blows my mind.
It blows my mind, too.
These series of events and these things are freaky. I mean, it's like our buddy Robin Nelson says, it's almost paranormal.
Yeah, paranormal. Shout out to Robin Nelson there of Paranormal Files 13 and, of course, Wrestle Popcast. Now, with Hogan going back to wrestling, and there for a while, Hogan was accepted by, of course, I mean, everyone loved Hulkamania, Everyone said their prayers, ate their vitamins and stuff. He beat Ric Flair. He was the world heavyweight champion, okay? Mm-hmm. Now, as time went on, people got kind of sour with Hogan because of, he was the good guy. He was the face that everyone loved. But there for a while in WCW, people got tired of him. And then, of course, in 1996 at Bash at the Beach here in Daytona Beach at the Ocean Center, they had their pay-per-view there. Now, Sting, Macho Man, and Luger got taken out early, and it was against the Outsiders, Hall and Nash. And apparently Hall and Nash teased that night there was going to be a third man. Who was the third man? And then towards the end of the match, Hogan comes out. People's like, Hogan is going to save Savage and Sting. Oh man! And all of a sudden, he does the leg drop he turned heel. Now, what was your reaction, and what was going through your mind the moment Hulk Hogan basically turned heel? All the trash, as Mean Gene Okerlund would say, from Daytona Beach filled the ring, and Hogan told the fans they can stick it, brother. What went through your head, and what was your reaction to that, man?
Well, it was shocking, to say the least, but Hulk's dad told him, he said, son, when his dad was still living at that time, he said, son, I don't think that's good. And that NWO stuff they wound up doing, his dad never liked that. He said, that's not really you. He said, but Dad, this is just part of what we do and what we're doing and everything.
Right.
But his dad said, if that's going to hurt you, son, he always told Hulk, he said, doing that isn't going to help you any. It's liable to hurt your whole career, son. But his dad was real upset about that turn.
Oh, really?
And, yeah. But at any rate, though, with the NWO gimmick wound up being the biggest thing that wrestling ever had up to that point.
Oh, yeah. It definitely.
But it was very shocking. I mean, but I'll be honest with you. When I stood between the rail and the ring at the Silverdome and watched Hulk slam Andre, that's the biggest thing that I've ever witnessed, up close and shocking thing that I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. Right.
When he slammed Andre at the Silverdome, and
yes,
that was really something. But that turn was different. And I always told Jimmy, I said, well, I'm sure this will all work out okay as far as selling tickets and whatever, but there's a lot of people upset that Hogan has turned,
Oh, yeah. It kind of, if you really look at it, in a lot of ways. I watched the Monday Night War series they had on the WWE Network. Vince even, said that was actually something I never even thought of, and that was actually good in the business sense, because it was like, wow, he would have never turned Hogan heel bad. He would have never done that. And then Vince even said, that was, he didn't expect that. That was something there that he never even thought of. He complimented, I guess, WCW and Bischoff for doing that. But I mean, Hogan, running with the NWO, it was great because merchandise and stuff. It actually, I mean, WCW was on top there in the Monday Night Wars for I think 98 weeks. Someone can probably correct me on that one there. But they I mean, the NWO took over and everything, and it was just fantastic, and it was just kind of revived his career there, which was which was great and stuff. But with
we had the Wrestling Boot Band out too. We had the album out, and we got to number 10 on the charts with that. Yes, that was a lot of fun too.
That was going to be my next thing to I was going to ask you there. Now, knowing Hulk Hogan and knowing and getting to know him, and with knowing Jimmy Hart as long as you've known him and stuff, and him being the manager of Hulk Hogan, and you pretty much got to know Hulk Hogan really well. Now, how did that come about there? The Hulk Hogan and the Wrestling Boot Band with yourself, Jimmy Hart, and Hogan. How did that come about?
Well, we were down working on some wrestling music at Jimmy's house in Clearwater, or excuse me, in Tampa. Forgive me. And pardon. And we were working. I forget what we were working on exactly, but what song. But anyway, the phone rang, and it was Hulkster, and he's calling Jimmy. He said, "Jimmy, what's going on?" And Jimmy said, "Well, Maguire's down, and we're working on some more music, And he said, well, don't y'all go anywhere. He said, I want to talk to y'all about something. I'm coming over right now. And so Jimmy was like a deer in the headlights, like something might be wrong or something. So he said, sure, Hulkster, okay, great. And he hung up, and he said, he was nervous. And he said, I don't know what Hulkster wants. He said he's coming over right now. He wants to talk to us about something. So I got no clue, Maguire. I really don't.
Right.
I don't know what's happening. I hope we're not in trouble, he said. I said, well, I can't think of what we've done to put us in trouble, but you never know. So there Hulk came in, sat down in the room with just Jimmy and myself in the living room where we had all the stuff set up, and he adjusted his do-rag like he does, and he looked up and he said, brothers, before this run is over, I want to do some more music, and I know that you and Maguire can do it. We can do it. You can help me with it.
Right.
And we looked at this and said, sure, Hulkster, we'll be glad to do something. What do you got in mind? Well, that's your all's deal. You all figure it out, brothers, and let's figure something out, and let's do some music.
Right.
And so we went, okay. So the next day, we went to Hulk's beach house. He and Brutus came over to the beach house, and Hulk pulls up in this 1976 Cadillac, and he knew that I was a car guy. I bought and sold muscle cars and stuff, and still do. And he said, Maguire, I know you're a car guy. He said, go out there and look at the mileage on that Cadillac convertible. I went out there, and it had 212 miles on it. Jeez. And the window sticker's still on the window and everything.
No way.
And anyway, so we sat in there and actually pinned most of the whole album. Now, on the internet, there's so many things that are incorrect. It's another reason I came out of the shadows to talk and do this, because I want to set the true record straight on how things were put together and what the real story is.
Yeah.
Some of the internet says that Jimmy Hart and Hulk Hogan went back to the hotel room after a match one night and wrote that never happened. What happened is that Jimmy Hart and Hulk and me, we sat in there and we wrote everything you heard on the album down there at the beach house. And that's how it really went. And that's what we did. And we spent about 3 days at the beach house, off and on, coming back over there. And that's where the whole album was penned. And then we got a deal with Select Records in New York City. And then we got a deal with Arista Records in Japan. And, it went well from there. And then they wanted to book us on the Tonight Show. Jay Leno wanted us on the Tonight Show, but Eric Bischoff didn't want Hulk to do that because he didn't think that would fit his NWO wrestling character right.
Oh.
So we didn't do it. I always regret that. But we didn't do it because of that reason. I'm sure the fans might wonder, but now they know. But at any rate, we did one. I wrote one song on there called "When the Hulkster Gets to Heaven," and we donated a portion of all that money from that to the Baby James Foundation. The kid that was abducted and murdered over in England at that time.
Yes.
And that's by the way, that's we had the choir that sang on that is one of the top choirs in the whole United States, and they're based right out of Tampa. It was a Tampa Baptist choir of some sort. I can't remember the exact faction of the church, but man, their voices are fabulous. If you listen to that song, it was really great working with them. But we recorded the album, then we went over to the studio and recorded the album, and I played practically every instrument. On American Made, we had a guy named Todd Plant is singing it. And then, I'm sorry, I can't remember his friend. I added a few Eddie Van Halen-ish type, those guitar licks you're hearing. I'm playing all the other instruments, the bass, drums, keyboards, all the other guitar parts and everything. But Todd Plant, he didn't want to come over and sing it unless he could get his buddy to play on it too. So we allowed him to play on it as well. And it all worked out okay, but so that's how that went. But majority of all the Icon themes and everything, I played every instrument. And that was kind of our gimmick that, it was all self-contained. Two guys can do it all. And, and I think that I called up to WWE a little while back and told them that I thought that John Alacastro and his partner were doing a real good job. They finally found some people that I think are really top shelf and doing a great job for the company. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed, hearing. I like the Bobby Roode theme. That's good. And I like the Finn Balor theme. And, those guys, Alacastro is talented, and they're doing great work. They're perfect for what they need at this time in history, I think. I think we were perfect for what they needed in our time in wrestling history. And we could still do it. And like I told somebody, Al Castro and them doing a great job, but they're never going to be able to equal or beat what we did for all the icons. And that's just my opinion. I'll say it out loud. And if they're listening, sorry guys, but you're doing great work, but you're never going to equal what we did. Sorry. You got to have the icons like we did to work with and be inspired, and not to say that the guys they have aren't talented and great. But what does this tell you? Now, for the Crown Jewel event, you notice they're bringing back the people from our era to headline the event.
Yeah.
So what does that say? That tells you that there's not been anybody eclipse the Hogans, the Savages, the Beefcakes, the Honky Tonks, mans.
No.
Nobody, the Dusty Rhodes, there's, I'm not saying that somebody isn't going to someday.
Right,
but
right.
We were just lucky and blessed that we were able to come in and do this music during that time of the modern, I call it the golden modern era icons of wrestling.
Yeah.
And we're just lucky, and I'm thankful for it. I just want to thank everybody that ever listened to it or bought any of the video games with my music on it. I just want to thank all the fans so much, because really, you get lip service and you hear all these people getting awards and say, yeah, it's all about fans, and it's just lip service. But I'm telling you right here and now, loud and clear, this ain't lip service, that it wasn't for people like yourself and the fans and the lovers of wrestling out there, we wouldn't have amounted to a hill of beans. It's really the fans that made us popular. And, we gave the fans something they liked, but it was the fans that put us where we are. Without you, without the fans, we would be nothing.
Exactly.
Period.
Exactly. Definitely. We're about halfway, or a little bit just halfway through the questions. The rest of the questions I have to ask you. And I love this. I love how this conversation's going. I just love it. And I want to thank the viewers that's viewing in on the live stream tonight here on twitch.tv/podcasting network. I want to thank everyone tuning in and listening to Hurricane JJ Maguire, the true master of wrestling ring music. I want to give a shout out to everyone that's tuning in tonight on this live podcast of the Everett Lee Show. Now, with doing wrestling ring music and stuff, and you've stepped away from WWF, WWE, and you live in Kentucky. You went back to Kentucky. Now, I understand that your involvement with a local promotion in Kentucky, which would have to be Kentucky Zone Wrestling. How did that come about?
Yeah.
How'd you get involved with Kentucky Zone Wrestling?
Well, I actually own the company now. I bought the company.
Oh, no way.
So, yeah. So the way it happened is they were doing some shows close by to here, and somebody told me, they said, well, I went to Kentucky Zone Wrestling show, and it was killer. To some of the people, they still tell us that they like our show as good or even better in some cases than the WWE shows. And, of course, I'm going, well, gee, thanks. We're just a pretty big-sized independent wrestling. We're not trying to claim that we're WWE by any means.
Right.
But we have fabulous talent and everything. The way I got involved with it is the previous owner had called me and said, would you like to come and make an appearance and just, meet and greet? Just come and do a meet and greet.
Right.
And so I said, well, I would love to do it. Does anybody really care? And he, oh, sure. Come on, JJ. We'd love to have you. So I said, okay. So I went and did the first show and just did the meet and greet thing and had a lot of fun and really enjoyed it. And then next thing you know, the previous owner came to me and said, JJ, we'd like for you to be involved in the programming and everything. So anyway, I wound up coming out. I'm the first thing that people see after the national anthem's done. They introduce me, and I come out and go between the rail and the ring and shake all the people's hands and pat the babies on the heads and thank them personally for coming. And then I holler out, what we're fixing to do and so on and so forth. I'm like the goodwill ambassador. So I got into that role. Mm-hmm. Well, then that went along. And then the previous owner said, well, JJ, we need to do more with you. And so it just went on more and more from there.
Right.
So
right.
then as I got more involved around it and whatever, he asked me, he said, would you like to buy into the company? And I said, well, I guess it depends on what it's going to cost me and what's involved, but we work every Saturday. And here's kind of a laugh for you. Ohio Valley Wrestling, which you're familiar with, which I love. I love Al Snow and all those, and Rip Rogers is to me, Rip Rogers is the Hulk Hogan of the foot treaded South, you know.
Right.
I love Rip and everything. But OVW came down to Somerset a few weeks ago, and they only drew, I think they had 50 paying customers. Well, the smallest show that I've ever done with our company is we've never done less than maybe 125 people. We usually average 200 to 300, and when we did the Apple Festival in Liberty, Kentucky 3 weeks ago, we had about 700 people outside.
No way. Wow.
So
you draw that many
I was kind of shocked. I mean, Ohio Valley came down, and they wanted to use some of our wrestlers. They called us before the show and said, would you like to include some of your wrestlers with us? And we said no, because this is our territory, and you're kind of down here in our territory, but that's okay. It's a free country, I guess. But I was kind of shocked Ohio Valley couldn't outdraw us. So there you go.
Wow. Well, and we know any real wrestling fan or a hardcore wrestling fan know the history of OVW and
it's a great history.
Yeah, it's a great history.
Fabulous. And of course Al Snow took over and whatever, but now they have this Gladiator Network or whatever it's called that bought into the company or whatever too, and they're promoting them more and whatever. But you must understand that OVW is not WWE's farm team anymore. No. And for years and years, they were the developmental concourse for future WWE stars, you know. But in the meantime, it's been sold off for 2 or 3 times, and actually Dave Hebner owned part of it at one time, and they're a great company. Don't get me wrong. I love OVW. I love Rip Rogers, and I love Al Snow and the Head and the whole thing. Yes. But this company that I'm with really has diehard fans, and KZW has been going for 11 years. That has a lot to do with it, too. Right. But like I say, we work all over the state, and we work regular, and so the people are used to us, and they like what we do. And I'm not saying we're the greatest thing that ever landed in America, but as far as independent wrestling, I'm telling you, we've got talent that can go on par with any WWE wrestler, anybody. Our guys do everything and more that you see on a WWE show. Yes. You know, we don't have hillbillies that are barefooted and cut off shorts and no shirts running around trying to pretend they know how to wrestle. So in the meantime, I got my wrestler's license in Kentucky. You have to be licensed to be in these shows and so forth. So I'm actually now a licensed wrestler. And the first time that I came out, I had a confrontation with Johnny Suede. He's one of our heels and one of our bad guys, and so on. So the first thing I did was knock him down. I threw 2 sucker punches and knocked him to the floor. The people went ballistic over there.
Nice.
So I knew I was all the way in. Nice. I'm knocking people down and coming in with an iron fist and taking the company over and straightening all this out and get rid of all this cheating. And, you know, the bad guys, they don't like it because I'm stepping on their toes and knocking them down and stuff. And I warned them. I said, I'm not afraid of any wrestler in this organization, because I've been trained by one of Bruce Lee's 5, which is true, one of Bruce Lee's 5 Jeet Kune Do, or Do, depending on where you live and how you want to pronounce it. Bruce pronounced it both ways through his career. And I've been trained by those guys. I don't fear any wrestler in this organization, and I can stand up for myself. So the first thing after I said that, I knocked one of the main bad guys to the floor. So I'm having fun, having a great time, and got great guys to work with, and I want to thank Kentucky Zone Wrestling for asking me to just come and do a meet and greet to start with, and that forced me to come out of the woodwork and do what I'm doing. And now look, I'm on your show and doing a lot of other people's shows, and I'm just having a second wind in my lifetime. It's really fun, and I love wrestling, and what can I say? But that's how I got involved with Kentucky Zone Wrestling.
Right. I love that, man. I definitely do love that. I think that's great, and I think it's fantastic, man. You're having a fun time, and you love doing it, and I love that. Now, one thing I've talked with you before I got you on the show was when we were talking and stuff, and then I called you and I reached out to you about coming on, and we had some conversations and stuff. And one thing I mentioned to you on my way coming back from Tennessee last week, I took a little trip back up to Tennessee, and on the way going up there and coming back, I listened to a lot of Sirius XM, and I like to listen to the talk radio, and I was listening to Volume. Well, one thing about Volume was I was listening to Eddie Trunk, which he was on That Metal Show, which was a really good show back in the day on VH1. He has a show on Volume called Trunk Nation, and they were talking about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for 2019 nominees and stuff. And I don't know if you've heard anything about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for 2019, who they picked. A lot of people are okay with who they picked out for this year that was nominated, and a lot of people feel that artists and musicians who contributed a lot to rock and roll and to just in general, just rock and roll, a lot of artists got snubbed. Like, one thing I can think off the top of my head was in the metal category, which would be Judas Priest. Someone even mentioned Duran Duran and some other people like Thin Lizzy, just getting the snubs. What's your thoughts about who has been nominated for 2019 in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? And I just want to mention, a lot of people think it's a joke, this year's nominees.
Well, the criteria for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is not based on 87 million records sold.
Right.
It's not based on any of those. It's not based that you had 17 number one records.
Yes.
If you look closely, the criteria for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is the most unusual contribution to the industry. What is the unique? See, I said unusual, I meant unique.
Mm-hmm.
It's based on a unique contribution to the industry.
Yes.
So I got to thinking about that, and I know what you're saying about those groups. I always love Thin Lizzy, and all those guys are fabulous, man.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to thinking, if it's really based on your unique contribution to the music industry, and it's not based on popularity, though it looks like it,
Right.
And they say that it's not based on popularity, but it sure looks that way in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to thinking, if they're basing this stuff on unique contribution, I got to thinking, wait a minute, isn't not wrestling music a most unique contribution to the rock and roll music world?
Oh yeah, I would agree with
That's
you right
what I
there.
thought, and I got to thinking, wait a minute, let's face it, our music was heard more than a lot of hit records because we were all around the world in 160 different countries, and this music, this entrance music, is playing continually on NBC, ABC, CBS, cable syndicated, on and on and on. And so I got to thinking, wait a minute, maybe Jimmy Hart and myself, maybe we might be contenders for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, of course, Jimmy's in the WWE Hall of Fame as a manager.
Yes.
But there's talk in WWE that I think that they're going to wind up inducting he and I in the WWE Hall of Fame for our music contribution.
Mm-hmm.
There's talk of it. So I'd say before it's over with, we'll be in the WWE Hall of Fame for our music. But I got to thinking, I think that we actually qualify for uniqueness with all our wrestling things. I would give anything to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I mean, that would be my greatest dream come true. I mean, I would love to be in WWE Hall of Fame as well, don't get me wrong, but to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame would be just something beyond belief. Because a lot of people think that you have to be the Rolling Stones or the Who or popular people to be there, but it's not based on that. It's based on the unique contribution to the industry of what your music did. Mm-hmm. So I think that what we did with the wrestling entrance music is definitely viable in that category.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely do agree. It's like, why not? Because you contribute a lot and stuff. And your music, I'd hate to say this, the people who's going to agree or disagree with me, but, I don't care, because I believe that wrestling theme music is played more than albums, because you hear it. You hear it.
Definitely is. And I've got the proof here to prove it in the log sheets from, our Performing Rights Society and everything. See, I was in charge of all our business stuff too, and
right.
I made all the deals for us and everything, and kept up with everything on that. And the proof's in the pudding, and it's right. I've got it right here. I mean, it's unbelievable. You wouldn't believe all the plays and all the digital downloads and digital plays, and it's just phenomenal.
I could believe it. I definitely could believe it. I got one little story to tell you here that happened to me today, talking about wrestling music. A friend of mine sent me a text, and it was a link to YouTube. So I was like, oh no, what did he send me? As soon as I clicked on the link, it brought me to YouTube, and he sent me Booker T's theme music on the YouTube there. I started laughing, and I responded back to him, and I was like, can you dig it? And then I waited a little bit, and then he texted me back, and he was like, sucker.
Yeah.
It's just stuff like that, man, is just, it shows right there, like, wrestling theme music is played and streamed and downloaded more and stuff. There's times where I'm like, what is that one theme that I heard from that one wrestler? So I'd Google it or search it and lead me to YouTube or some streaming service. And I definitely do agree that wrestling music is played more and listened to more than actual music and stuff. And it's just, it's great. It definitely is great. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I guess I'll just leave that as that there before we wrap this up right here. Real quick, I want to thank you before I ask you my two last questions here. I want to thank you for taking time out tonight and coming on. And I want to thank everyone viewing the stream here on twitch.tv/podcasting network by tuning in and listening to the true master of wrestling ring music, JJ Maguire, Hurricane JJ Maguire. I corrected myself there.
That's right, baby. That's right.
Now, what can people expect coming from you in 2019? We're 2 more months, man. 2018 is come and gone. 2019, 2 more months. What can we expect from Hurricane JJ Maguire in 2019?
Oh, all sorts of stuff. I never give up and never quit. It's just like Roman Reigns said last night, and I'm sorry to hear about his leukemia issue. My uncle died of leukemia, and but we're going to keep fighting, and we're going to keep trying, and we're never going to give up. And I tell everybody listening, in your dreams, don't let anybody ever tell you can't do anything. Try to do everything that you want to try to do in your lifetime, because you only get one run at this, and might as well run hard. Like Honky Tonk Man told me the other night. He said, Jimmy, we didn't think it would last that long, so we really put up the extra stuff because we figured it wouldn't last that long. And look how wrong he was. It's still lasting.
Yes.
So, but at any rate, back to answer your question further, I've got a book coming out next year. Jim Phillips of the Gorilla Position and Ryan Bowman, who's mastering the helm of that company. Jim is interviewing me now. We're compiling information for my book that'll be out probably next summer. It's called My Life in Heaven Town, and it's a view not just of wrestling, but it's a view of my whole life of being in show business and then winding up in the Gentrys and having hit records, and then moving to Hollywood and working for Glen Sound Company and doing all the stuff for the movies and stuff, and all the icons that I met along the way, Henry Winkler and Farrah Fawcett and Jim Garner and all these people. And it's really an overview of my how I viewed the celebrities and how they are in real life, because most fans don't get a chance to know the celebrities except just when they're in their character of what they do. But my book is going to be a retrospect of my life and my experiences in working for Bob Hope and a lot of older icons and so forth, and then fast forward working with Hulk Hogan and so on in WWE. But the book will be out, like I say, sometime in the summer. So when that gets ready to happen, I would like to come back on the show and talk to you some more about some more of the things. But these are just a few of the stories. I mean, I could talk on for 17 hours of, I think, stories that people would be interested in about their favorite wrestlers and their favorite movie stars and that sort of thing. So that book is going to be in that sort of context. And we're compiling it right now. And so I'm doing that. And then I've got a couple of screenplays that I'm pitching in Hollywood that I've written with a friend of mine. And I'm working on that. And then I'm performing with KZW. And then I'm putting a CD out or a download, or however you want to get it, next year of some newer material that I put together. And I also have a CD that I just sell personally that's called Masters of the Ring. And there's 3 songs on it from the Wrestling Boot Band album, but also there's other themes, an alternative theme that Ric Flair wanted, but Vince didn't, at the last minute, Vince didn't want him to change the theme because people were so used to Pomp and Circumstance, like for Randy Savage. Randy wanted something different too. And people were used to 2001 for Rick, so Rick really wanted to change it, but Vince advised him not to, so they didn't. But I've got a slew of some themes that were done that weren't ever released, and I've got Macho Man, singing, oh yeah, and he's rapping on it, and nobody's ever heard that. That's that's from my private stock of my private vault. Mm-hmm. Now I don't have that for sale online because I knew if I did that, every country in America, here in between here and overseas, would duplicate that and rip me off on it. But if you're willing to come, I'm going to be at the Richmond Comic-Con in Richmond, Kentucky on the 3rd of November. And anybody that comes and sees me personally, I give you a written letter of why the songs are written and what they're for. And they're numbered. And I've only printed up 50 of those copies. So if you come and see me personally, I will sell you one of those and give you a personal letter and the signed picture and the whole thing of the Wrestling Boot Band to go with it.
Nice.
And the whole thing like a package. But I'm not selling that online or anything for that reason.
Mm-hmm. That is awesome, man. That is definitely awesome. You got a lot going on for coming out in 2019, and where can people find? I want to ask you, where can people find more of Kentucky Zone Wrestling at?
On Facebook, you can just go to Kentucky ZONE Wrestling, and you can see pictures from the events and different things. Or you can also go to my Facebook page, John Maguire. That's Maguire. And I usually some of the things we've talked about's on there, and different pictures and all that. And I'd like to say that Andre was a great friend of mine. I was one of the few people privileged that Andre would allow into the dressing room to be around when he's playing cards or whatever in the back. He's very strict about that, but he loved me because I'm also a magician, and I would do card tricks for him. And Andre loved cards, and he asked me to sit with his girlfriend in Cleveland one time. He didn't want the boys messing around, being around her. So he said, "Jimmy Maguire, will you sit with my girlfriend? I don't want the boys messing around with her," and blah, blah. I said, "Sure, Andre." And so Andre was really kind to me, and I missed Andre greatly. And I watched The Princess Bride the other night, and it really touched me to watch him. And like I say, I'm just privileged. I always say this at the closing of my interviews. I always say this. I say, God gave me talent, so I took it to the greatest show on earth. I traveled the world with the greatest of all time. Entertained people of color in all walks of life. Who knew that wrestling is such a powerful force? I did.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you so much, JJ Maguire, for coming on tonight welcome. Here.
All my pleasure, Everett.
It is awesome.
All my pleasure.
Thank you.
And wrestling is one of the greatest forces. Next to God and Jesus, You got wrestling right there.
You definitely do. You definitely do. You definitely do. And I want to thank you for coming on tonight. And I believe that is it for the Everett Lee Show podcast tonight. Before I sign off tonight, I want to mention that this Sunday, I will post the time on my Facebook page on Everett Lee Show on Facebook and tweet it out on Twitter at the @TheEverettLeeShow right there. Those viewing in. I want to thank everyone viewing in and listening tonight to this podcast. ELS Uncut, Robin Nilsson. I'm going to have Robin Nilsson on this Sunday to talk about him at the 70th anniversary of the NWA event that he went to this past weekend. And of course, David C. Russell of Deathmatch Russell Podcast will be joining us too for ELS Uncut. We're going to have a good time on that podcast, and be sure to tune in on Sunday for that as well. And you can follow more Everett Lee again on Facebook, Everett Lee Show on Facebook, and of course on Twitter at the @TheEverettLeeShow, and of course Podcast City Network over on podcastcity.net. You can check out the Everett Lee Show, Robin Nilsson with Paranormal Files 13, and Russell Popcast, and of course David C. Russell of Deathmatch Russell Podcast. And you can check out The Imaginarium with Scott and Todd, Second Rounds, Florida and New York, Super Radio Brothers, and much, much more over on Podcast City Network, over on podcastcity.net. And, of course, Facebook, Podcast City Network, and on Twitter at Podcast City Net. And that is it. I am going to hit the outro music. Going to jump off here and going to get some sleep or get some rest and start a new day tomorrow. Everett Lee signing off. Thank you for tuning in tonight on this podcast. I will see you again next week for another episode of The Everett Lee Show. Peace.